Doc on the Run. We help injured runners run.
The number one riskiest running activity. Whenever you're training, your goal is to get as close to your threshold for injury as possible without going over that line. And when you're injured and you're trying to maintain your running fitness, your goal is to increase your activity level without dipping below your threshold for recovery. All of that is about risk management. The harder you train during your big blocks just before your marathon, the more risk you'll sustain an overtraining injury. You're pushing harder. The more activity you do when you're healing an injury, the more risk you'll slow the healing process because you might stress the tissue too much. But some activities are inherently a lot more riskier than other activities. All day I think about running injuries. And when I run, I think about running biomechanics. And all day long, I talk to runners like you who have done something that was just a little too risky and they sustained an overtraining injury. Well, it may not surprise you that my personal training activities and the run courses I choose, the workouts I choose when I am training, are specifically designed to help me build fitness while decreasing the risk of an overtraining injury. But just to be clear, I am, by nature, a risk taker, so I'm not necessarily afraid of risk. One of the most popular running workouts that you can do to build fitness is a series of hill repeats, and I personally believe doing hill repeats once a week is likely the most effective workout to build running-specific fitness. I also personally believe that hill repeats are the number one riskiest running activity you can do. Well, if you can stomach the risk and you want to become a strong runner, you may want to do hill repeats. But make no mistake, it is risky, and this cannot be overstated. Now, I do lots of other things that are risky, but I do not do hill repeats. When I do house calls around San Francisco to see runners, I most often take a motorcycle. When I'm on my motorcycle, I split lanes. If you don't live in California, you may be surprised to hear that driving a motorcycle between the cars on the freeway is actually completely and totally legal. But it is very risky. But I don't do hill repeats. I fly a paraglider. Now, a paraglider is basically a parachute that flies in a similar way to a hang glider. Now, because it's flexible and it can easily fold up in midair whenever you run into turbulent air, well, if that happens, the paraglider pilot basically drops out of the sky. Flying a paraglider is risky. But I don't do hill repeats. For a few years, I raced motorcycles professionally. Now, I once crashed a motorcycle going 135 miles an hour. Racing motorcycles is dangerous, but I do not do hill repeats. One famous rock climb in Yosemite National Park is called the Royal Arches. It's an all-day climbing route that's about a quarter of a mile high. One day when I was in medical school, I climbed to the Royal Arches alone without a rope. Rock climbing without a rope for protection is risky, but I do not do hill repeats. I'm not suggesting you should get into an argument with your coach about doing hill repeats. Your coach's job is to actually design workouts that put you as close to your threshold for injury as possible without you actually sustaining an overtraining injury. If your coach puts hill repeats on your training plan, it's probably been included in that session with a great deal of thought and consideration of that risk. But if you are designing your own training plan and you simply do hill repeats on a regular basis, you may be putting yourself at unnecessary risk.
Doc on the Run. We help injured runners run.